Resume recording. Excellent. So welcome, and we are now recording. And so I am Paula McMahon. I'm the Engineering Together Chair. This is a collaboration between Engineering Together and After the Pandemic, which makes us a collaboration of the Tees Valley and Glasgow. So we've got a range of young people from both of them geographic areas here today. And what we're going to do is they're going to introduce themselves via our lovely panel chair, Christine, and they're going to give us some of their thoughts on frustrations, thoughts about wasteful past generations, and how we can actually prevent waste and reuse it through the circular economy. So without further ado, if I ask everyone as well to switch off their videos, so we're only focused on the 3 screens that our speakers, that would be great. I'm going to hand over to Christine Thomas from the RSA and Building Self-Belief, as well as No to Concert Incinerator, and she'll introduce herself and the rest of the panel.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. Yes, my name is Christine Thomas. So I got involved in this through the Royal Society of Arts, but I'm also CEO of a charity called Building Self-Belief, and we had originally planned a trip to Glasgow with some young people from Concert, and the idea being that we'll have a connection between England and Scotland, and Greg can testify to this, that Scotland are further ahead with us when it comes to youth democracy, the idea of having the vote at 16, getting young people more involved in the environment and giving them a bit of power, really, I suppose, and giving them a voice. So that was the original idea, and then what ended up happening was they decided to put an incinerator right in the centre of our town. So I ended up thinking, I can't lead young people and talk about the environment and improving our environment and giving them a voice and not actually let that happen. So I ended up leading a community campaign called Say No to Concert Incinerator. And we ended up going to the council. We had songs, we had films, we had letters, we had young kids involved, we had teenagers involved. We had the whole spectrum of the community. Everyone got behind it. We had protests on Clean Air Day. And I think we were just talking beforehand where we think the environment needs to be not being hijacked by certain kind of people almost, that we all need to take responsibility now, that it doesn't need to be kind of pigeonholed into certain people being interested. We all have to take some kind of responsibility. And this is part of, my background's English teaching. I haven't got an environmental background now, but I'm an expert now on waste management and waste hierarchy. And I think we do really genuinely have to do something very, very quickly. And I think it's brilliant. There's so many young people here prepared to have a voice, put themselves forward, and actually come up with some genuine ideas and kind of jolt everyone out of this complacency that we've got linked to the environment, and understand that I think it's such a huge topic, but there are small things that we can all do. And when we all start to do that, we'll get the message across. And I think all the young people here today have defined what they think their particular interests are. And again, if they can kind of have a voice about that and just take one issue and really go with that, then people will get on board and people will support it. So I know, if I hand over to Alice, first of all. So Alice is in particular, we talked about previously, the idea of fast fashion. And I think since the year 2000, there's been we've been inundated with plastics in our clothes. And I think no one's even noticed it almost. I was reading something like, people like farmers can't even sell their wool because no one wants wool anymore. No one wants natural products because it's so much easier to use plastic clothing and synthetic clothing. And that's only been really the last 20 years. And what can we do to stop it? So I'm going to hand over to Alice, and she's got some amazing ideas she's going to share with us all.
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm a year 13 student here at Stockton Sixth Form, and I got into the idea of climate change because I know past generations have impacted like the way we run like everything now, but we can't do anything to change what's already happened. But it has to come from the younger people to introduce ways to reduce climate change before it's too late, and especially within things like fast fashion and how we buy clothes, like not just going to it's easier to go to the cheaper products, but if you buy more if you buy second hand or buy better quality that's going to last you longer than something from Boohoo or Pretty Little Thing, which you'll wear once and never use again. If you buy something you're going to wear multiple times, that's going to have a better impact on the environment. And especially with single-use beauty products as well, like your shampoo bottles or your conditioner bottles, buying like refillable or using makeup that's in bamboo like packaging, which you can recycle easier, is something that will obviously have a big effect and is an easy switch to make because it doesn't impact with the actual usage of beauty products or clothing. Yeah.
Excellent. And we are going to hand over to Greg next, who's our Scottish representative. So obviously it's a huge topic in the minute in Scotland with the Glasgow conference coming up. So would you like to introduce yourself, Greg?
Yes, thank you. I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. But thank you, Christine, and thank you After the Pandemic and Engineering Together for the opportunity to take part in this discussion today. So my name is Greg Walker. I'm the co-president of Engineers Without Borders at the University of Strathclyde, and I'm also a current postgraduate student there studying renewable energy systems and sustainability. So just building upon what Alice has already mentioned regarding the fast fashion industry, this industry is horrendous for wasting resources, such as the materials used and also the water used in the manufacturing. This industry is also a very large consumer and essentially a very large waster of energy, which is one of our most important resources. So I would like to keep it relevant, but also direct the discussion a little bit towards the wasteful mistake that I would like to discuss today, which is energy waste. So energy waste happens for numerous reasons. The two large ones being irresponsible consumer usage and inefficient and outdated electricity transport technology. Something I found quite terrible actually whilst in preparation for this discussion is an energy usage analysis by the Green Alliance. They analysed the nighttime energy usage of 953 office buildings in the City of London, and they came to the analysis that they wasted enough energy yearly in these office buildings to power 65,500 homes. So I decided to crunch a few numbers and keep it relevant to where I am. So I'm from Uddingston, a very small town on the outskirts of Glasgow. We have a population of 6,700 and we have roughly 2,500 homes to house this population. So if you crunch the numbers, I found that 1 year of energy waste from a square mile in the City of London from these office buildings could power Uddingston for a minimum of 25 years, which is horrendous, and something has to be done and something can be done. So how can we decrease energy waste? As I say, I'll try to keep it concise. There are so many options, but what I'm involved with and what I'm very interested in is energy storage technology, specifically batteries. Now, battery storage is not something that the UK uses a lot of at the moment. We currently have capacity for about 1.3 gigawatts of energy storage, and we'd like to up that to 20.5 gigawatts of storage by 2035. Now, as I say, there are many other technologies we could use. Batteries is what I'm interested in, but batteries are not the sole solution, and they are not without fault. In order to get batteries, we need to mine very rare earth metals such as aluminium, manganese, and copper, amongst others. So how can we make batteries more sustainable and contribute to the circular economy? One answer is green batteries. And this is essentially between discharging and then discarding the battery. We cut out this step, and instead of discarding, we put it right back to the production, and we break it down into its constituent materials, and we increase the recyclability of all of these batteries, which in turn gives it a second life, increases its reusability, and then in turn decreases the carbon footprint associated with the production of batteries. And as we move to electrify our society, and especially the electrification of transport, increasing the use of EVs, electric vehicles, we will need much more, or many more batteries in order to suffice this. So green batteries must be implemented, and I think they are a great solution and they must be implemented if we want to use as many batteries as we will need to use in the future. Something else we can talk about perhaps later when the questions come is smart grids and how we can implement them to increase the efficiency between the energy developer or the source and the energy consumer, and make the entire grid and the entire world more efficient in energy transmission. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Really, really interesting, actually. And I think there's an interesting idea there about just because you can afford to use electricity in the City of London doesn't mean you should actually use it. And I think that's a massive shift that we can all make, really. That it's not just about economy, personal economy. It's also about thinking about everyone in a more holistic way. And so some really interesting ideas there about batteries as well. So thank you very much. We're going to move on now to Subarna.
Yeah.
And Subarna's got she's going to share some slides with us as a PhD student. Do you want to introduce yourself first? And then you've got a brilliant presentation for us.
Yeah, that's nice. I just take my presentation first because I want to make sure that it is.
Took a little minute or two to load last time, so
It should work.
That's
it's
it.
coming up now.
Yeah. Is it working?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. As what Christina mentioned, I'm Shubana. I'm a PhD student at Teesside University. I'm currently working with construction waste on how to reduce construction waste. I mean, not just about recycling or reuse. We need to reduce waste. So I'm currently working with the software platforms and the construction industries, how we can communicate and collaborate so that we can reduce waste in the future. So today I'll be discussing about what is the actual scenario, what is the current scenario of construction waste management and how it should be improved in the future so that we can meet the climate demands and other kind of strategies and legal standards. So before we get into that, I just want to show you a small graphical representation of why construction waste is really important. As you can see, almost 40 billion tons of materials is like consumed by constructions, and almost 35% of landfill waste is coming from building and infrastructure projects, which is really a huge amount. And as what you can see in the graph on the right side, especially in UK, almost 59 to 60% of total solid waste is coming from buildings, which is like, it is increasing from year 2004 to 2016, and it is still expected to increase to 70% by end of 2050. So it is really important that we need to reduce construction waste. So having said this, what actually the real scenario of construction industry is, industry is really doing good. I mean, in terms of we are recycling a lot of waste. We have almost recycled like 89 to 90% of non-hazardous waste is recycled. But we are still in stage 3. We are not in we have not reached stage 1 or 2, which means we are thinking of waste management only after it is generated. We are not having any pre-planning before it is generated. We need to really do that so that we can reduce waste being generated. So that is something industry has to improve, because recycling is what, again, I said, it is a reactive approach. In order to do proactive approach, we need to think in the design phase. You need to, I mean, we have a lot of design strategies like designing out waste, designing for reuse and recycling. But on top of all that, we need to have a strategy that we need to prevent the waste being generated rather than waste being sent to landfills. We need to have a division there. And that approach should be proactive. And once if waste is generated, the classification is more important. The reason is, when we were analyzing a lot of waste reports, we could see that the volume of mixed waste is really high. Having a lot of mixed waste, it is not easy for us to analyze, because only with help of waste reports, we can really understand what waste is generated, how we can improve in the future. So classification is more important, especially if you're in UK and EU, we have European waste codes, which will be useful for the, useful to classify waste. And the most important thing is behavior change. Don't think that waste is a waste, it is a resource, because almost 10 to 20% of the project cost is spent on managing waste. So this is more important. These are the very simple steps. It is not very technical because the technical factors are really complex in terms of construction, which I cannot really discuss here. And I think these are the very simple steps. If followed, we'll have a great impact in waste management. Having said everything, as what I said, like the input and pressure which we give to nature is like what we get back. So let's not put too much burden on the nature. So that's it. Thank you.
Interesting there. And I think the construction is similar to what we're saying about electricity, really, that how to use things more efficiently. Not so rather than it just being about cost and thinking about actually reduction. I think it's interesting as well how much waste comes from construction.
Yeah.
And how it can be, how it, you know, I think unless it comes from the top down, that's when people really start to take an interest. But I think we're going to have to get to a point where we all actually do something to put the pressure on the top. So thank you very much, all three of you. That's brilliant. What we're going to do now is open up to questions. So Paul and myself have got a few, but we've got some in the chat as well. So if everyone who's watching as well, if you could put a couple of questions in the chat, we'll put them to people and to the guests. So that'd be great.
Yeah, in the meantime, I'll ask a question. So we've covered three very, very different topics, and there's no doubt about it, everything is complex and everything is interlinked. So I'd like each of you to think about sort of how they all interlink and tell us, so how could sort of Alice's examples, can you think of ways that that'll actually help with the energy and with the waste?
Yeah, like Greg said, fast fashion is a big energy drain. It's so much it's overproduced. That's why you have so many sales on these sites. It's because they have so much product that they can't get rid of, that they have to sell it on for even cheaper than they originally sold it. And it's a cycle that you have to escape, because it's just wasting so much like plastic resource and like energy. It's just, and then with the like waste as well, if it doesn't get sold when it's like, and then it's out of style, it's just going to be like binned and like never used again, which is not a way forward, because that's so much waste when it could be donated, but they never donate it.
I was thinking things like, so for young people, for example, so rather than thinking you had to have a new outfit on every time you went out, could you kind of start this big thing where you wear the same thing a few times and it doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Well, I have stuff in my wardrobe that's older than Alice's.
So there's cultural shifts there as well, that young people could quite easily make a real stand and say, do you know what, it doesn't matter if I wear this more than once.
But I think that also has to come from like our social media influencers. You see them, it's like every post, it's like sponsored, it's a new outfit, and that's not obtainable for like the normal youth who don't have that, because they feel like that. And that's why products from like Boohoo and Pretty Little Thing are so attractive, is because they're a lot cheaper than the products that you would pay a bit more for. But if they normalised wearing more outfits more than once, you would see a decrease in the use of fast fashion.
I think as well as the big vintage movement, isn't there? Yeah. So do you want to say a little bit about that?
Like I thrift. This outfit I have on is a thrifted outfit, because you find things that are in style but from 10 years ago, and because styles always come back like every 10-15 years. So if you went to a second-hand store, a charity shop, you would find things that you would pay more for online, and it's just about going out and looking. And there's even online thrift sites that are easier to use if you prefer online shopping too.
Yeah. Very good.
Right, got a question here. So what are the best ways to engage the construction and fashion industries to take action around waste? So Shubhana, do you want to answer that one? How do you think we'll persuade construction to actually stand?
Yeah, actually taking construction into account, we cannot say that this is the actual strategy that we need to follow so that you can achieve X amount of waste reduction. But we have a lot of multiple strategies. I mean, we can make some approximation to do waste reduction or waste reuse or recycling. But in terms of aesthetical aspects in construction, I feel like irrespective of engaging with fashion industries, construction itself is to some extent is we focus on aesthetical side rather than structure. We want cool fashion designs, which is really causing a lot of waste. So making design standards is one of the best possible option we can do to reduce waste. Rather than focusing on too much of stylish aspects, we can go for the standard options because that is more important in the current world. We need to do that. So I feel that is the best way we can do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, you could argue that with fashion as well, really. If there's a certain standard or a minimum standard, you could transfer that across all kinds of industries. Thank you very much for that. Greg, we've got a question here. Are there any plans from the current UK and Scottish governments to increase energy storage capacity in the future? And how seriously do you think they're taking this?
Yes, I think we've missed a question out from the top of the chat.
Okay.
All right.
As well from Julie.
Yeah, you start with that one then. How much interest from the car industries is there in recycling of batteries? That's interesting, isn't it? Ooh.
Yeah, I
There's
think
a massive EV vehicles, isn't there? So
in short, currently not enough interest.
Really?
However, as we do look towards, or rather as we need to electrify the transport industry, it's a very big umbrella. It's cars, trains, buses, metro, it's everything. So as we do look towards the electrification of that, we're going to need exponentially more batteries as we continue. And this isn't just a trend that's going to happen in the UK, it's going to be worldwide. So the more batteries that we create, the more expensive they will get. And right now, that might not necessarily be felt in terms of finance. But as you continue, the companies are going to feel it big time. Privately owned companies are going to need to compete with governments who are trying to implement electrified public transport. So I don't think there's much interest in green batteries right now, but there certainly will be in the next 2 decades if these companies seriously want to turn a profit. It's a finite resource, so it's something that can't continue.
I know in Holland, the Dutch have got electric trains now. And I think there's a couple of states in America where they've gone totally electric. So I think it's definitely some certain places have made a huge movement towards the use of batteries, isn't it, instead of oil and diesel.
I think in Holland as well, I think there's been some spells where the trains have actually been totally run on renewables. So it's not just the fact that they're EV, it's actually that the electricity supply in them is renewable, yeah.
Electric buses is quite a big one as well. Buses account for a lot of carbon emissions because they're quite old, they're used for a lot of time. But the next upgrade of public transportation and buses will be the electrification of them, which will take a lot of batteries.
So is the capacity for storage then, as the second question? Do you think we've got that capacity now, or do you think that's something we've got to work on?
We absolutely don't have the capacity right now. We're not even close. I think in terms of energy storage, in terms of batteries, we have about 1.3 gigawatts, which is far too low. We're aiming towards the decarbonisation of the grid by 2035, which is great, and it's a great goal to work towards. But the missing link is energy storage, and it's not talked about enough by the governments. All the governments in the devolved nations and the UK all say more renewable energy, which is partially correct, but renewable energy is a variable power source. You depend on atmospheric conditions. So without finding a way to bridge the gap between supply and demand and storing excess energy generated by variable renewable sources, there's no way we'll be able to decarbonise the grid. Currently, our largest form of dispatchable energy, which is essentially just energy that we can call upon in terms of high demand to fill that gap, is gas. And without finding other storage options, be it batteries, pumped hydro, we are always going to rely on gas, which is a fossil fuel. So to decarbonise the grid, we need energy storage, and it's actually something that's not talked about nearly as enough as it should be.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I think it's partly that we've got all of these issues, but we do need the solutions to it as well. And I think it's easy to talk about renewables, but I mean, and energy storage is going to be massive, isn't it? And it's interesting that we haven't actually got that capacity. It's all right talking about decarbonising, but we obviously need the infrastructure for the alternative.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
There are so many alternative options as well, but the reality is all of them are still in the early development stage.
Right.
I know hydrogen storage is something that's spoken about quite a lot. The system efficiency of hydrogen storage is currently at 30%. So you're wasting so many resources in that cycle alone. So without that being improved, its efficiency being improved greatly, there's no way it could be implemented on a large scale. That goes the same for compressed air storage as well. It's just unfeasible. Right now, the best opportunity we have is batteries. But to repeat what I said, it's not the one solution that we can rely on. Currently, no energy production solutions are without environmental consequences of some kind. So we need to find a portfolio that's diverse enough to allow us to find the most efficient, but also the most environmentally friendly way to store and distribute energy.
I think it's interesting as well that, I mean, to be honest, most people turn a tap on and get their water, turn their gas on and get their gas. And I'm not sure how many people kind of make any connection about how it's stored, how they get it, what they do with it, you know. So I think where we create or educate people almost that it's not just magic, that, you know, there are whole sets of processes here, which links in the Paul's question here. So he says, thank you for an excellent talk. Can I ask if you think young people can pool energy to influence the rest of us in these regards? And if so, how? So this sense that we need some quick, although we need something to happen, a big kind of societal shift, not just us plodding along for another 30 years having to think about it. So Alice, you got any quick suggestions?
I think it is education, like throughout. You don't like my interest in things like this came from my own research, not from something that was given to me from school or from college. And I think it should be part of guidance lessons in secondary schools, because people just don't understand the like scale of it. And even if it was like and targeted on the telly towards like older people who obviously it's come from them generations, but they don't actually understand the impact that they're having now and the way that like how often they drive and things like that affect. And it needs to be, people need to know what they're doing and how they can change it, because I don't think people always say, oh yeah, climate change is a really bad thing, but they don't have any knowledge of how to change their actions. So
do you think, as the younger generation, you've got, I'll come back to you here, Greg, what can you do then to kind of get all the older people back on board and thinking about it?
Turn the lights off.
How about Subarna?
Yeah, well, it starts at the grassroots level. You can influence people at every stage. You can influence your family. That's maybe a small step, as Alice very correctly said. Education is key. You can influence your family. That may have a knock-on effect to their work colleagues in their office. The dominoes continue to fall. At the higher level, you could specialise in climate change, sustainability, the circular economy, like myself, and then look at it from a technical perspective and look at technological innovations for how we can address this. You can do events like this. You can speak to people and really start up a cross-generational discussion with people in order to get the message across and get people involved and interested in it as well.
Thanks, Greg. Shubhana, what about industry then? How do you think? Greg was talking about the City of London and how much electricity is wasted. Is there any way where kind of the industry and the office blocks and all those kind of those areas could be like reminded that they're actually just wasting energy here?
Yeah, in terms of construction, in the beginning, we have to classify whether it is a construction phase or operation and maintenance phase, because in terms of construction phase, we are really doing well. because the stakeholders are really doing well to manage waste, to manage energy and others. But in terms of operation and maintenance phase, which is the longest phase of construction project life cycle, it's almost like 40, 50 years. But the users in the building are not only the construction stakeholders, it is like multiple people. We sit in a building, they might not be from the same background, and the people will not be sure whether how to save energy and so on. But in terms of what others said, education is the main important thing we can do. But in terms of buildings, I have seen in a lot of buildings, we have the energy standards displayed there. Like giving an example, if you switch off this light, we can save this much energy, this much cost, and so on. So we need to have such kind of we need to provide them with a basic background that this is the impact we can get, because they're not sure what is the impact, why they're saying us to switch off the light, why they say, like, they think that it is just about the cost. It is not about the cost. We have a lot of environmental aspects included in that. So on the whole, it's like we need to educate multiple people, not only the people from the industry, but everyone, the whole public.
Can I ask, to do with construction then, Subarna, that obviously that's the bit that comes after the design.
Yeah.
So knowing what you know related to construction, what do you think you should be telling the designers?
The one main thing I want to tell the designers and architects is focus on design standardization. Like try to design a structure. If it is a wall, it has to match with the size of the material. Like, only then we can reduce waste, because there are a lot of offcuts, especially steel and brick offcuts are really high in the buildings, which happens because the standard size of the design is not aligned with the size of material. So that is the one most important thing. If we do, we'll sure we can reduce a lot of waste coming out of it, because designers have a control of that. It's not about contractor or anyone. It is all about designers at that time.
Question for Alice here. Would you be willing to host a stand at Climate Action North's One Small Change event?
Yeah,
Put you on the spot.
I'm passionate about educating other young people on the ways they can change how they act. It's not that big of a change to use a makeup product in a bamboo container rather than a plastic container, but people just don't know where to buy them from, or how big the impact is and how much it would be better for them. And refillable makeup is cheaper after the initial buy, because you can just go back and get it refilled rather than buying an entire new container. And I would, because it would be a way to educate more people my age.
Yeah, great.
Do you think it's important it comes from you as well, rather than older people?
Yeah, I feel like young people, they feel like older people don't understand. And if it is someone who knows what is the impact on young people, then they would be more feel more represented.
Yeah. So that's Alice. Obviously, that's one of the things that as a young person she can do, which is go to an event like that, which is talking to members of the public. So that's a great way to get a message about everyday items. So I'm wondering, sort of going back to Paul's question almost, so Greg and Subarna, thinking about the main cause of what the issues are to do with energy and construction, who would you go to, and who's the best person to speak to them, and in what format?
To start with,
in terms of industry, or?
Yeah, so each year, if I think Subarna's got her answer. So if Greg, while Subarna's talking, if you think about thinking about energy, who's the sort of biggest problem, and who's the best person to speak to them in what format? Subarna answer.
Actually, we all talk about the energy production or the material production. Like, we suggest the producers or manufacturers that try to develop a less carbon emitting material or less energy emitting material. But the consumers are equally important to producers, because producers are just in the stage of, if you consider life cycle, they're just in the production stage. but we consumers are going to be in the long term, in the long term phase. So I think it's all about the consumers. We need to educate them first rather than, producers are already being educated, but not the consumers. So we have to do that, especially in terms of construction. I can say it is clients. Yeah, that is the thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that most firms nowadays have an environmental and social governance, an ESG sector in one form or other. So larger companies are really looking into how they can improve themselves, and this is great to hear. I completely agree with what you said. We need to reach the consumers as well. No one's perfect, but it's changes that are made at every increment, at every step, that have a renowned effect. So it's the joined up sustainability policy. It's not just one thing, it's everything together and everyone together.
Got a different question here. So if every school had solar panels, would this help with energy supply to the grid? Because quite often they're only open 32 weeks of a year. So would that help? That kind of thing, you know, where so we can look at the proportion, how many buildings are used and how they're used.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could definitely use the energy generated during the school year to power the school, and then use the excess energy when the school isn't in use to store that and then feed it back to the grid. But there's a number of projects you could look into. I think one I really enjoyed reading about was in the Netherlands, in the middle part of the motorway. They decided to change it to greenery, and they put up big trusses. On top of the trusses, they had solar panels, and underneath it, it was a bicycle lane. And they put lots of greenery and shrubbery. So you've got triple threat there. You've got renewable source production, or renewable electricity production, better health benefits for the public, and also more greenery, which will help reduce the carbon emissions from the cars. So we can implement it in so many ways, but absolutely putting solar panels on schools would be a great way forward.
I've seen some really interesting, I've just been following these things like, it was a supermarket in Canada actually, and they turned their roof into a community garden. And they were growing all the produce on the actual roof of the supermarket. And so I think, you know, with a bit of creativity, if every town did something like a community garden, or, you know, you could do some really amazing things. But I think that's something where we can empower communities almost and get everyone working together. Would be brilliant. Paula, you just highlighted something there.
We're up to there.
Right, so question for Sivashanmugam and also Greg, is best practice around energy storage efficient construction techniques being shared across companies and governments, or does competition create a barrier?
Not entirely sure. Across companies is probably more likely. Across governments, I can't speak for that, I'm not a government official. However, with COP26 approaching, you would definitely hope that these ethos and this technology will at least be talked about and shared between these 26 nations. And that's 26 out of almost 200 nations, I think, in the world. So that's just a small part. But if these are the leaders in renewable systems and sustainability, then if they do share their ideas, then this hopefully will have a knock-on effect. And we'll see how COP26 goes. The climate was supposed to be solved in Paris. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to seeing what is actually being discussed, but the potential is there, the opportunity is there, so hopefully we'll see some success from that.
Shubhana, what do you think then? Do you think there is a competition there that kind of restricts our progress almost?
Exactly. The main thing is we have a lot of techniques being developed every year in construction, like design techniques, construction techniques. We have a lot of new technologies. But when we take in the aspect of industry, I feel like the top industries, they are doing well in terms of innovative aspects. The reason is because the cost of the technology, the cost of implementing new methods and educating stakeholders in terms of technologies is really high. Although the government has some good targets, it is still kind of unanswerable. Like we are not sure whether it is reaching all aspects of industries to SMEs, large industries and everyone. So that is something which we cannot answer at the moment. Everybody is doing something on their own. Like, construction is a very diverse industry. We have a lot of aspects to be involved. Everyone is doing something. When we compare the results of their past with the present, yes, it is good. But in general, like, we don't have any specific common answer for that.
Actually, in the Northeast, you may not be aware, but we've just launched a one voice strategy for construction.
Okay.
So it's been led by Construction Excellence Northeast and a few other partners. And one of the key threads through that document is the word value rather than cost. So what's the value of the construction to the end user? What's the value of things that we're using in order to get there? So not just the monetary cost, but everything else. And there's lots and lots of different organisations work together to actually put that document together to make us the best. The hope is that we're going to be the best and greenest region in relation to this, but happy for others to share it, because it's very, very important that we collaborate, and the past sort of ethos of being against each other has to go out the window. We have to work together to get to where we need to be.
That sounds like a brilliant idea. For Alice, how can we encourage young people to take control of their environmental future? What do you think we can do?
I think a lot of teenagers and young people have like brand envy. Like when you see someone especially with makeup, like you think of your brands like MAC and Sephora, they package everything like eyeshadow palettes in like plastic containers. But if they changed it to bamboo, that would create a big impact for everyone, because then the brand is doing it. Whereas now you have to seek out other brands that do it in bamboo. So either educating young people on specific brands that do it in the reusable packaging, or like, what's the word? Encouraging the bigger brands to make that change to refillable products or bamboo packaging. That would be the best way to entice the young people into making this change. And if people want to get involved in it, it is just looking. I use websites like Upcircle and it's called Zao, and they're makeup brands that you use it up and then you send it back and they refill it and send it back, or you can order it in bamboo packaging, which you then easily recycle or can compost. And that is the best way to reduce single plastics. And we have in the area a zero waste shop, and you can go and with your shampoo bottles, your conditioner bottles, even like laundry detergent and things like that, and refill they have big jerry cans, and that is eventually in the long run cheaper than buying a new bottle of surf every time you're doing your washing and things like that.
I think what's interesting with brands is, I mean, there's loads of research into it. If one person starts using a brand and likes it, they'll stay with it for years and years and years. So I think, there could be, if they had any sense, they could actually genuinely make a profit out of it, rather than, I mean, I got an advert for Khloe Kardashian makeup on and I think, why are you targeting me? I really don't want it. But why would I ship in something from America as well? It's that kind of the shipping in of it, and it's all of it. It's the whole process needs to be exposed, not even just the makeup itself. But that's really interesting, and there are definitely ways forward. I've never even heard of those websites, so we can maybe do a little worksheet, Alice, on how to teach young people to buy more environmentally friendly products.
But that links to that local thing that you said about the veg being grown on top of the supermarket, and that they're not shipping things from America. If we had labels on them, like Paul's just suggested there, to various things, then we could actually make more informed choices, couldn't we?
In our local zero waste shop, they started doing locally sourced veg from that people grow in their allotments and things like that, because then that removes, when you go to a supermarket and your veg is in a plastic package, why does it need to be? Because it doesn't. So you can go and get as much as you need in your own packaging and not have that plastic barrier in between.
Cool.
there was something about hydrogen buses
Oh
somewhere
yeah, there
along the
was
line,
very,
Greg.
yeah, in
Which is
Aberdeen.
changing the topic a little
That's
bit.
right, yeah, there was hydrogen buses have been introduced in Aberdeen. Is that, do you think that's a good idea?
Is that a good idea then, hydrogen buses rather than EV?
Absolutely. It's an idea. I did a quick Google search there, so I'm actually informed. So they are still prototypes, although they have been implemented kind of as a test run to see if it could be viable for large-scale implementation in the rest of the UK. But currently, each bus costs £500,000 to develop, and I'm not sure about the upkeep of the service costs as well. But when you compare it to the cost of a regular double-decker bus, the new London bus costs to £250,000 each. So that's already 100% increase in cost for the council essentially that's doing it. So it's not all about cost; it is about the environmental impact of it. But as with many of the ideas and many of the technologies that are coming out right now, they're great ideas, but they're just not economic. They don't have much economic value right now. They require more research and development to implement on the large scale, and it's a fantastic idea and really cool technology. But I think to be produced on the large scale, it needs to be more affordable for councils, because you could get two buses for the price of one right now. Yeah. And even if it was an electric vehicle, you have the option to then build a tram-like system around the city, and then the buses can act as kind of half bus, half tram, and also take directly from the grid as well. And then you have the opportunity in the future, another technology that's been developed, or an idea that's been thought of, is the interchange of energy between EVs and the grid. So in times of need, the batteries can produce more energy or give more energy back to the grid. And at night and in times of low demand, they can be put right back into the batteries. So it's just a feasibility study needs to be done of which is the best to implement. But it's a great idea, and it's something I would like to see more of, definitely.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, again, a lot of this is going to come down to cost, and it's similar to what you were saying about value, really, isn't it? So if it's going to cost so much money to implement it, value-wise, if it's not there, it's not going to take off.
But equally in the construction industry and engineering in general, we used to allow a certain amount of people to die on our construction sites, because the argument was it would cost too much to keep them safe. But as soon as something came in and it was legislation to basically say the hierarchy of controls is, basically don't do things that are going to put people at harm, and that zero deaths was the target, there was no such thing as an acceptable number of deaths, then everybody's put in place things. And yes, it does cost money to keep people safe, but when you're required to do it and everybody's got that same level playing field.
Let's go back to what I said with Shubana, really, is that right at the top, having the rules in place for everyone to follow, and be making people do things rather than suggesting it, almost. Yeah.
And I mean, Paul put in there about the, could we have young experts come together to do things like kite marking and certification on sort of various things. So I mean, you've already said about labelling on makeup. So
I think that what we could do, I'm thinking here, is kind of almost like create our own set of influencers that are environmental. Do you see what I mean? So instead of following whoever you will follow, create an environmental kind of kite mark for young people and say, look, this is the kind of product you should be using.
Yeah, that's the enticement of like Greta Thunberg. She's a young voice who people want to listen to because she does know what's going on, and she's willing to like speak out against things that are not right. And like,
she needs some help though.
Yeah.
She can't do it on her own. And also the vitriol she gets, I think quite shocking, isn't it? I think, I mean, she's tough. You've got to give her her due. She is really tough, and she does front it all out. But I think she does. I think this is where, rather than just seeing her as a figurehead, that you all need to join in and kind of do what can think. So I think the kite mark site, it's almost like creating your own kite mark as young people and saying, look, this is the kind of product we should all be using because this actually supports the environment, rather than this is like the sparkliest eyeshadow or whatever, or it lasts the longest or whatever, however they sell the products. So thank you for that. I think the Dutch come out of this quite well, don't they? They seem to be putting a lot of effort into new initiatives, and I keep reading about good things from there.
Can I sort of ask the sort of final question for everybody? Because this was all, so it's almost like going back full circle and coming back to the circular economy. Another country that comes off well in terms of the circular economy is Iceland. When they actually had their financial crash, they had the opportunity to start from scratch, and they had a clean slate, if you like. So what they did was they actually said, well, not only is it good business sense and good environment, it's good environmental sense to actually not waste anything, and they've actually set up towns that have got symbiotic businesses, so the waste from one then gets used for something else, and that is truly a circular economy. So I'm wondering, in each of the areas that the people have got, what do you think, sort of what one thing can you think of, what one product or material or something that actually can be as a byproduct that can be used by somebody else, or can be used again, Alice?
I think with fashion, it's you use your clothing as much as you can before throwing it away. But then stores like H&M, you can donate your like old, absolutely knackered like clothes, and they will reuse the fabric for like separate things, and they give you like a £5 voucher. And that is like a way to get like even your worst clothes back and reused. And it is like, and you're getting that incentive as well. But it's not like advertised well enough that everyone knows about it. So like it should be when you do your spring cleaning or you're like cleaning out your wardrobe, go and donate your worst stuff to H&M and get that back, or giving it to charity shops, because people don't, they just throw it away, and that's not.
Very good. Greg, do you want to go next?
Well, with regard to Iceland, I think they're quite lucky in the respect that they have a lot of geothermal energy available. That's something we don't have a lot of in the UK, so it's not feasible on the large scale for us. But for Iceland, if you implement one of these reactors, one of these cycles, you can actually use the excess heat generated by one of these cycles and then funnel that right back into the town and to be used as your heating, which I think is quite fantastic. I think it's finding ways of just reusing any wastage at any point in the process and bringing it back. And it just comes down to efficiency, increasing the efficiency of society. I think it's quite
Iceland, it is an amazing country, and I can testify it is very expensive, but then you buy that is the going rate for you're not, so it's kind of like they're living within their means almost, and you can only buy local produce. So there's not loads of vegetables, they don't import loads of veg, and you basically just have to eat what you're given, because it's fish, because and so they're kind of living by it almost.
Yeah.
And they're not bringing where we've got fruit and veg from all over the world. They just don't have it because they can't grow it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really interesting a way forward as well, really.
And before we go to Subarna, just a point: some of the most expensive places to live in the world are also the happiest, right? So Iceland, Norway.
I was in Copenhagen this summer for an internship.
Copenhagen.
Oh yeah.
So everything truly costs what it costs, but the wages are increased to suit, and all rates of happiness and all of the indicators of such a thing and environmental are actually more improved than they are in this country. The price of things, saying having things cheaper doesn't make us better and doesn't make us happier. So sorry, Sivana. So what's your one thing that you would do that would sort of contribute to the circular economy?
Actually, in the current scenario, what construction is doing is we are trying to reuse and recycle materials within the same sector. I mean, if we are generating waste from building, we are reusing it in the buildings, or we are doing something. We are not coming out of the construction at all. We are doing, if there is some kind of recycled aggregates or which cannot be managed. We just send it to some kind of road or highway projects or something like that. So we need to come out of the construction and we need to find a way where this particular material can shoot some other industries, I mean, which can produce the same kind of structural stabilities. So that is where the industry has to work on, because if we do that, we'll have a lot of options for recovering waste. Because being in the same circle is not going to help us more. We need to come out of it. That is what I think we need to really do.
Thank you. So I'm going to start closing this session and say thanks to everyone for their contributions. Without a doubt, there is themes that we've all identified, even though we've talked about some extremely different topics of sort of energy, batteries, construction and materials, and makeup and beauty products. They're totally different. However, they all have the same sort of theme. We shouldn't waste any of it. We should put any waste that we have back to a useful purpose. So we should reduce and then reuse before we actually worry about recycling. And all of it comes back to the consumer. Yeah. What are we doing on an individual basis? What small changes can each of us make? And there was throughout the whole thing, there was everybody has avenues in which these messages can be spread. And just remember that we've all done lots of small things to contribute to what is a massive problem. So we all need to do lots of small things to contribute what is going to be the solution, which is going to have to be at all levels of society and individually. So we've got some upcoming events. There's these events are basically every fortnight on the same time and day through the After the Pandemic channels and Engineering Together channels, and we cover a variety of different issues which we've touched upon today because it is all very complicated and all very embedded and with each other. And also the RSA have a Young Green Democracy Day on the 11th of November. And if you'd like to drop pingram.councillor@rsa.org.uk, then Paul will provide details of that. So I'm going to finish off by using a Greta's sort of statement, and it's basically no one is too small to make a difference. And just don't forget that all of us have a voice and we should be using it. And in particular, the youth should be using it. You're going to live with the greatest of consequences because you're going to live longer, but also that means that you've got the greatest of impact. You make a change now and you've got a much bigger impact, and you're speaking to other people as well that have equally that impact. So there's some thank yous coming in to everyone for an interesting discussion and some ideas to take away, and that people have found it very interesting and excellent. So this will be recorded and it'll be available on the After the Pandemic YouTube, and we'll be shouting out some of the ideas and statements and things that people can think about. So without further ado, I'm going to say thank you very much to our panel chair Christine and our panelists in the room Alice, and online Subarna and Greg, and thank you for everybody who gave us.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. So I'm going to stop the recording now and say goodbye. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.